proceeding was dealing with a much narrower issue than the issue before this committee, and that decision itself is subject to the appeal process, and that will play out in the way...
But surely the committee should have regard to what the court found.
Of course, the decision is publicly available to this committee.
Mr. Bell, one of the things that we're grappling with, talked about what the government should do as a landlord. It's the manager of a significant capital estate. It's also...
I grew up in one of them.
Yes, exactly. But it's also got broader obligations as part of our democracy, and I think those points are really well made. Part of the challenge that we've had, obviously, is we've had an instance in the last couple of years where there was a set of circumstances that required the evacuation of two of the buildings in pretty quick time.
Talking about COVID-19?
No, I'm talking about the Elgin Street Towers in late 2022 when there was a catastrophic failure of the sewer stacks and the residents needed to be relocated within
Bullshit!
a 48-hour period. First of all, I think that was a probably reasonable action for the government to have to relocate people in those instances. Being made aware of through that sort of incident, being made aware of the...
Thanks, Chair. Thanks both for coming in. I just want to ask, do you believe the reports that have been made publicly available by building surveyors and engineers about the existing condition of some of the buildings? For example, the report that was tabled in June last year from April 2022 from Approval Systems on the Elgin Street Towers said that there was evidence that the sewer stacks and risers were failing and subject to significant leaks. Dampness in the walls and the formation of mould appeared to be the sewer stacks appeared to be the source of that internal dampness. That there was evidence of extensive corrosion of concrete reinforcement. That there was non-compliant ceiling heights in common corridors, and that reduced ceiling height is a health and an amenity concern and a consideration for smoke layer in the event of fire. Do you believe that? Have you read it? Do you believe it?
I think it's uncontroversial that Rahu believes in evidence of the government's managed decline of public housing.
Have you read it?
I haven't got it in front of me, so I'm not sure.
You haven't read these reports in preparing both your submission, your position, and the evidence coming before us today.
I've seen those reports.
I asked Harry, had he read them?
I'm part of a group of people. I'm not the only person required to read reports. That's not my role.
Right.
My role is to speak for my members, and we've got a lot of people who've read all of these reports.
And are you concerned by them, and do you think that it demonstrates that the government needs to take action to improve the condition of those who are tenants of the public housing towers?
I couldn't hear the question, sorry. Could you speak up just a little bit?
Do you believe these reports? Do you think it demonstrates that the government needs to take action to improve the condition of the tenants who live in these public housing towers?
I believe that there are a lot of improvements that need to be made in the public housing towers. I don't think that's a controversial statement. I think that it's been pretty well documented that the estates have been basically run down and not maintained for many years. Am I believing that all alternatives have been looked at, and that is been part of the decision-making process for the government? Not necessarily.
Well, time's up. Is monolith and one size doesn't fit all. But we do have disability access standards, we do have a Disability Discrimination Act, they do have widths of doorways which should be made common and entry standards for getting into showers. Do you think that any proposal to renovate or retrofit
public housing towers should comply with current disability access standards?
Ideally, yes. I think that.
What does ideally mean?
I think that ideally, in this case, would mean that where possible, you meet disability standards. I would say that when looking at this issue, the private sector does not meet with a lot of disability standards.
Is that the standard we should hold government to? What the private sector gets away with?
No, but I don't think that the government or the public sector has held itself to any worthwhile standard as far as maintaining the stock that it has over many years. So I'm trying to hold you to a higher standard than you're holding yourself. Yes, make them as accessible as possible. However, not everybody needs the same level of access, and the people that are there do find those homes accessible, as they have told us, as they have said before. And so if a home is accessible to the person living there, it seems to me to be pretty disingenuous to want to tear it down and rebuild it and put it in private hands to make it more accessible. And I will say that the new builds have shown themselves to be of far worse quality. We've been talking to people in the new builds that have happened in the last 5 or so years who are dealing with mold and leaks that the people in the current housing towers just aren't dealing with because they were built differently. And so I think that if we want to hold ourselves to our standards, then we need to hold ourselves to those standards.
If there is ample evidence of mould and leaks in the towers, let's not lie to the committee. I think we're done.
We are going to call time on there. Thumbs up. So
To Elgin Street. And what happened in Elgin Street in the two towers there in late 2022 that required the buildings to be evacuated. If you could take the committee through what happened, the evacuation that was required, and take us through what happened in those first two towers.
Given that it happened shortly before I joined House Victoria, I think it's probably best boys to answer that question.
At Elgin Street, the copper sewer stacks, which have contained inside 3 risers in the buildings, were failing and leaking raw sewage down the walls of the apartments, down into the electrical substation at the base. That building has got 3 risers which share electricity and water, and those are not a good combination. The only way to access those risers, so when we showed you around the high-rise towers, we were able to open and see the pipes. Those were contained internally at the back of bathrooms. The only way to actually access those, to repair those pipes, is to partially demolish the bathrooms. In doing so, that would incur a cost of about $8 million per tower to break in and replace those. The towers, when you go through and then retrofitting those back to ensure that we have that separation around risers and making them closer to being code compliant, because under national construction regulation we try to bring those up to standards, and we know we can't, and the question is, can we get reasonable dispensations? Well, we couldn't necessarily get the dispensation, but when you go through the economics of retrofitting those towers versus that of a new build, then the economics for those work out that it's line ball, and you may as well invest in a new build with 60, 70 years of life rather than a remaining tower with 20 years left in the structure. So that could fully code compliant because they've got issues around ceiling heights, thin floor slabs around noise and fire, the ventilation systems were poor, the fire stairwells are narrow and not code compliant. And the question we asked in one of the approval systems is, could we get those to a level of compliance where we could get a certificate of occupancy? And the answer is we would struggle to do that.
So you'd struggle to get a certificate of occupancy because of non-compliance with...
Because of the non-compliance, we would have to work around the current structure to do that. So while we could reconfigure rooms and get the risers correct, that comes at a cost, but certain things around ceiling heights, noise issues, we wouldn't be able to overcome.
Right. And what happened to the residents who were living there? And how long did it... Presumably they had to be moved. How long did that take?
Again, that was just before my time when I arrived. I think we had 2 residents in place. That had been a program that had happened over a number
of the TRAV document